brands, buckled bands, tricky dicky master plans, words for the herds and the flocks of the birds that never endeavor to become clever, whatever.
Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women. That is good.
Hello, hungry ghosts, goblins, free spirits, and dwellers on the threshold. I'm Oliver Perrin for Semiagog. As I've said before, constantly dealing with the world of current events, with various stratagems, with moves on the board of the great game or whatever, it gets tiresome. So my mind needs a break. I need to step back from the deluge of headlines from time to time. I need a break from the constant provocations on whatever level. This is particularly true when you're creating content for viewers. You find yourself trying to stay just ahead of the headlines, just at the right point of an erupting news cycle, so you can ride the wave. I've successfully done this a couple of times, most recently with the timing of my piece on Turks in Holland, which many of you may have seen. The algorithmic gods of YouTube saw fit to allot to me 46,000 views for that one. It was an alright piece, but to be honest, there are many others on my channel that I think are much more notable, much more significant, and much more worth my viewers' time. And most of those are languishing somewhere between 500 and 2,000 views. But trying to ride that wave, trying to catch that news cycle at just the right point has a price. It's stressful. Now, I mean, admittedly, it's merely first world stress, but it's stress nevertheless. And whatever I can do to reduce that stress wherever I can, I feel like it's effort well spent. And I hope that you, my viewer base, feel the same way. Young or old, everyone needs a break from the not so grand spectacle of current events. Now, I'm still working on what this channel is all about. And as that settles in, I'll refine and focus it a bit here and there. But I can tell you this, to those of you who've been along for the ride, I'm always going to have to mix it up. Otherwise, there's really no point in it for me. I'm just too interested in too many things. I have to move around a little bit in order to maintain my curiosity. I'm hoping that I will be able to connect with people who feel the same way. I'm hoping I can establish a viewer base that feels the same way. I would like to have viewers that basically are just like me, hard to shoehorn into typical categories. That's usually a pretty sure indicator of more developed individuality. Now, I know I'm usually talking about political or social subjects. Today, I would like to look at something a little bit different, talk about something that's a bit off that beaten path. And that is a subject that's rather close to my heart. That is writing. Now, I'm not just talking about writing in the sense of writing books or articles. I'm talking more specifically about writing with a pen or pencil on old-fashioned paper. Remember that? Penmanship or whatever? It used to be considered an important part of education, but it's fallen out of fashion. And now children carry laptops to school. In many cases, they simply press print. But I want to focus more specifically, even more specifically in this video, on the process of keeping a written journal, a written record of one's life, thoughts, and affairs. In particular, I want to address this to younger people because it is the upcoming generations that are being encouraged to abandon the process of writing by hand. When my father died a few years back, there was all sorts of shit that needed to be taken care of. A number of those tasks were more or less trivial worldly affairs that needed wrapping up. Things like paying bills, sorting out who needed to be paid for what, dealing with taxes that might have been left unpaid, all the kind of crap that's associated with dealing with the estate of someone who has died. Fortunately, my father kept what he liked to call a log. That's what he called his journal. Now, that was a couple of generations back when he was still alive. He lived on a schooner, sailed around the Gulf of Mexico, and I suppose that's where he picked up the habit of, keeping what he used to call his captain's log. By my lights, he was prone to take it a little bit too far. He wrote everything down, all the time. Whatever chance occurrence, every transaction, agreement, plan, every noteworthy event, like running into somebody by accident, or getting a call from an old friend, or getting into an argument, or making a payment, it all made it into whatever notebook he was filling with ink at the time. But that level of attention to detail offered him many advantages. He seldom experienced doubt or uncertainty about the things that he had done because he kept a meticulous record. Now, you can characterize it as being OCD. You could say that he's anal retentive. He's a compulsive note taker. You could even say it's, mildly autistic to be that worried about scribbling everything down, depending on how you, characterize that flavor of note taking. But I've met lots of other people in my life who are similarly concerned with keeping a record of what they've done, where they've been, who they've talked to. And in general, I find that they're ahead of the game. And I'm not talking about taking notes with your iPhone. Those can very easily be lost. And from a certain perspective, it's possible to argue that they were never really there in the first place. I'm talking about using a pen. I'm talking about intentionally setting aside the little bit of extra time that it takes to capture things in handwriting. That amounts to time spent considering things. And that's time well spent, as far as I'm concerned. Gadgets, while useful, are all about doing things more or less instantly. And that's not what taking time to reflect on things is all about. My father's logs made it much easier to settle his affairs. And when my brother and I discovered that he'd kept all of them all the way back to his early 20s, we realized we had a rather detailed picture of a life on our hands. And his journals were filled with far more than housekeeping and financial details. We discovered in them an extensive record of his life and his thoughts, written in his own hand. My mother also writes. She too kept a record of her thoughts and ideas since her early 20s in what she calls a journal rather than a log. She always encouraged me to do the same. As it happens, I too keep a journal. In the different notebooks that make it up, I've brought together my own collection of thoughts, ideas, experiences, and essays. And when I feel like it, when I choose to go back to them, to look at them again, they serve as a basis for my entertainment, as a collection of useful reminders about how not to fuck things up the same way twice. And even as a way to reach back to long gone friends through my notes about jokes they told or screenplays we said we were going to write together. So call it a log, a diary, a journal, or whatever. Just get in the habit of writing yourself down. I can see the drawings I made and the coffee stains left on the page when I was making notes in my journal during my second cross-country motorcycle trip across the U.S. I can see little glimpses of my thoughts and perspectives during my first trip to Switzerland. My mouth hanging open at how much everything cost. I can even see little notes in my margin where I'm, wondering to myself whether the Swiss actually get out there and cut their grass with scissors. I can see what I was thinking the day before, the day of, and the day after I separated from someone that I really loved. I can see what I dreamed, literally and figuratively, and how that changed over time. This sort of record can amount to much more than an eccentric pastime, than a waste of energy, paper, and ink, or an exercise in elementary narcissism. It can help you to remember where you've been and why you went there. It can remind you of goals that would otherwise perhaps molder in obscurity until it becomes impossible for you to pursue them, impossible maybe even for you to remember that you had those goals. It can help you to piece together events when your memory isn't what it used to be. And I'm not talking about Alzheimer's. I'm talking about how full your memory gets with ideas and experiences. Sometimes great ideas and insights just get lost. This might seem almost incomprehensible to younger people. But, once you've been around for a while, you end up with all sorts of shit socked away in the storehouse of memory. And one of the great ironies of aging and maturing is seeing how utterly forgettable many of the things that you thought were important, critically important, how utterly forgettable they turn out to be. And best of all, in reading your record, you can recognize how you've grown and changed. The details of what you're explicitly writing about are just one dimension, arguably one of the least important dimensions of that record. If you pay attention, you can also track your transformations based on what you noticed, why you noticed it, what you cared about, what you took offense at, what you let slide. This too can tell you much. All of that will change and develop just as you do. But without a record of the sort that I'm describing, without keeping a journal, those details disappear. They're lost forever. And it's less about whether they'll provide a record of some kind for those who come after you. It's much more about their usefulness as a tool for you to sit back, ruminate, and consider again what you've been through, why you went through it, what your trajectory has been. Remembering what used to bother you can lead you to ask useful questions about why it no longer does. Same goes for things that used to be fine with you, that you can no longer tolerate. But it's only in the act of making such a record, it's only in the act of reviewing such a record that you set aside the necessary time to contemplate what you've been, what you are, and perhaps what you will be. Writing by hand is particularly suited for this. Tapping a keyboard does not compare. Using automated dictation software does not compare. Flirting with Siri does not compare. Using a pen is rather like riding a bicycle. It's faster than walking. You get a little bit of wind in your hair. You can still see that you're making progress more quickly than you would if you were, walking on foot. But the thing is that it's not too fast. It's not like, howling down a 6-lane highway looking at nothing but asphalt, assholes, and billboards. You can still taste the air. You can still smell plants as you pedal past. You can still see the scenery. It's not too fast. And that's an important thing to bear in mind when you're talking about reflection, about considering who you are, where you came from, where you're going. There's something very, very useful about doing it in a measured way that isn't hurried. There's no way around the need to be in the present. And sometimes the easiest way to be in the present is in that moment when the pen touches the paper, when the forward-moving tip of the pen marks the present moment, while the mind is lost in dreams of the past and future. It's part of the reverie of writing. Writing is some serious shit. That's why it holds such a high place in so many religions, spiritual practices, philosophies. And we think, somehow, that it's sufficient to replace it with glowing pixels, imagining that jamming our fingers against a greasy, unyielding glass surface is typing. This is not a replacement for writing. This is not a superior alternative. All these digital revolutions have their place, and they provide conveniences that I'm very happy to enjoy. But they do not replace writing by hand. In closing, I will say that in order to take full advantage of keeping a journal, in order to take full advantage of all that a handwritten record has to offer, you have to be able to put a little bit of effort in every day to build it. You have to be willing to commit that time daily to make that record, to craft that record, and to engage in the process of reverie that goes with thinking your thoughts, reviewing your memory, and translating those into characters on the written page. Modest but steady commitments are what the most powerful expressions in life are made of. That's the secret of everything from meditation, prayer, martial arts, or ritual magic to cognitive therapy, becoming a crack shot, learning to play the violin, or even succeeding in business. But never lose sight of what a journal is. It's an investment in recognizing and remembering what you've learned, who and what you are, how you think and feel, and maybe even why you're here. Get it? Got it? Good. Semiagog, out.
Books, brands, buckled bands, tricky dicky master plans, words for the herds and the flocks of the birds that never endeavor to become clever, whatever, but never try, never fly, and never ever, never knew why.